Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I am a stand-in host for Jack Greenstock. We're going to have a smaller panel this Easter holiday. So I guess I'll start off with the introductions for those who don't know. So, Dr. Coco, please introduce yourself.
Of course, then my mic wouldn't come unmuted. Hey guys, I am Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. I'm excited to be here. I guess we're a little bit short-staffed, but we'll pick up the slack and have a good show nonetheless. So I got some interesting things going on I'll be able to tell you guys about, and yeah, I look forward to the show.
Spartan, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you, Matthew. Thanks for having me. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram. That is my only social media. Instagram. If you find it on anyone else, it's not me. It's all one word, no spaces. And if you don't do Instagram, you can also get a hold of me as an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. And I've got experience in commercial growing, home growing, synthetics, and organics, so I can help with all of those things.
Very awesome. And Tao, I see that you've shown up. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hello, Matthew, Spartan, and Dr. MJ. It's always good to see you guys. Happy Easter, everyone, and everyone in chat, or Passover, whichever is, or nothing at all. Happy April 17th. So, yeah, I'm the American One on YouTube and the American One _ Keens on the IG. And yeah, it's always good to be here. And yeah, let's see what's today's going to be about.
I'll always take a good April 17th. So I mean, in the past, whenever we've had smaller panels, it's usually a great time to offer suggestions for questions in the chat, to be honest. So I would be fine with doing some of that, unless somebody has a topic they'd like to start with. I actually have something I'd like to share, but I'll leave that for a little bit later.
I'll just say, hey, Matthew, turn on your camera so it's going black screen on your side. And maybe switch to the other view, the gallery
view.
Yeah, gallery view. But oh, there we go. I see it now. It's coming.
Oh, so much better.
Yeah,
everything's right in the world again.
We missed the incoming transmission from Matthew Gates.
Yeah, that's right.
That's an important part. I could start off. I got a few things to sort of announce. We got some cool things going on this week at Coco for Cannabis. We just sent out a newsletter, but we're doing a show tonight after this show. Our award show for the New Year's Grow Challenge is going to be on the Berkshire Bud YouTube channel. And then tomorrow I'm doing a part test premiere on my channel and doing an after show on that with Mike Lynn, the founder of Atrium Lighting, on the Hemp with Gigi YouTube channel. And then on Wednesday is 420. So happy 420, everybody. And we start the Spring Autoflower Challenge on 420. So get geared up for the Spring Autoflower Challenge, register for that. We're going to do a live show kickoff party on the Smot Poker YouTube channel on Wednesday. And we'll also announce the winner of the Photon Tech XT 1000 watt CO2 Pro Grower Love giveaway, which everybody can still register for on the Coco for Cannabis deals and discounts page. So there's just like a lot there, a lot of stuff we're giving away, and a lot of live shows. I'm doing a live show on Berkshire's channel, then on Gigi's channel, then on the Smart Poker YouTube channel between now and Wednesday.
Honestly, that is quite a bit.
Yeah, but I got that out of the way. So everybody's welcome. All those things are still very much open for people to sign up for or get involved in.
How many? I'm just curious. Like, I don't know if this is like, if this is not couth to ask, just tell me, because I might be ignorant. But like, how many people sign up for those sorts of challenges? I'm just curious how it's grown over the years.
We usually get like 300 to 500 people that sign up for the challenges. Fewer than that usually, keep journals, and I should not be one to talk on this point, but fewer than that actually sort of keep journals through to the end. But yeah, hundreds of people, lots of growers growing together. And yeah, we got some cool prizes and stuff like that, but it's just a grow along, there's no sort of like grow related competition involved there. It's about supporting each other, growing together, seeing what happens in different grows when everybody's sort of lined up and growing at the same time. With autoflowers, it's particularly interesting, and a bunch of people are going to be growing the same autoflowers in different setups, the same seeds from the same breeder. So that's always really interesting to see.
That's going to be super interesting. So you can see how the same genetics might perform under different growth styles or different medias or different, that's cool.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's differences. There's differences like in how big the plants get on the one side. But what's really interesting with autoflowers is there's differences in sort of how fast they're ready too. Sometimes by, a not inconsiderable margin. So it's fun to watch. The Spring Autoflower Challenge, I think, is the greatest spectator challenge of the challenges that we run for that reason.
I have a question.
Like 3 days, guys, you can still sign up. Grow along, join us.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a welcoming community, and it's always a great knowledge base. I was just having a conversation on Instagram, sort of about the idea of like, well, it was actually in response to the idea of like posting responses to questions and things like that, and just sharing information in general. And somebody was making the comment that they sort of miss forums where people's screen names, people's the people that by a name, some sort of moniker. You could have these conversations long periods of time, very heady. Everyone knew each other, small group. You don't get that.
That's exactly what we got. Yeah, if you miss that kind of thing, head over to Cocoa for Cannabis. We got the live chat room, and and people just hang out there all the time and chat with their friends. And a forum and the grow journals and the challenges and all the rest of that. So we do all of these challenges mainly to grow the community and just sort of build the community and create these kind of events that build that sense of community. That's always been one of my big sort of goals in starting the Cocoa for Cannabis website in the first place.
I do have a question from Smart Poker. Why do light manufacturers have different square feet for veg versus flower under the same light? And he says, so he's sure you answered this before.
I have. It's a good question about lights. And a lot of growers, it leads a lot of growers to think that they could, that they need to give less light to vegetative plants. Basically, when you have more space for the same light, you're going to have less light everywhere because it's going to spread out. And, in vegetative growth, growers usually don't target as high of a ppfd as they do in flowering growth, like particularly in a commercial growth setting, for example, where the veg room might not have really high CO2 levels. So they're going to be growing in the veg room at like, maybe an average of 600 ppfd or 700 ppfd. And into the flower room, they're going to be growing under an average of 1,000 ppfd or 1,100 ppfd with higher levels of supplemental carbon dioxide. So that's why. Now, if you had those higher levels of supplemental carbon dioxide in the veg room, you'd be able to give them that much light too. You just don't need to. You just don't sort of have to push the plants that much with light during veg. So the answer is basically because having ultra high density light is less important during vegetative growth than it is during flowering. And the only time this really comes into play is like if you're setting up a different veg space and flower space, because like nobody's gonna like shrink their space when it comes to flowering time or something else, right? Like you can't start in a 5x5 tent and then like shrink it down to be a 4x4 tent when they go to flowering or something. So the only time that really comes into play is like when you're setting up one room as a veg room and you want to think about like laying out lights in that room. And so you would lay out a looser grid of lights because you'd be targeting a lower average ppfd. And so they would say, this could cover 6x6 if you're laying this out in a veg room. But in a flowering room, you'd want to lay it out like 4x4 or 5x5 or something and get a higher density light.
It definitely makes sense to me. I did say there will be some chat questions. I do have one more. This is just for the panel, so I guess we'll go around. From Sour Diesel Tangy, what's everyone's thoughts on drying? I'm going 70 degrees, I'm going to assume Fahrenheit, 60% for 3 days, and then 70 degrees, 50% relative humidity for the duration of the drying cycle.
Yeah, we'll assume Fahrenheit unless he's like drying clay in a kiln or something, right?
Yes.
Why don't you go, Spartan?
I'm not a fan. I'm not opposed to those temperatures, but I'd like to be lower. I would like to be lower on the 70 degrees. I'd like to be 65, 60, more in that zone. I'm not super upset at 70. It's just the warmer the temperatures, the more loss to any volatiles. So terpenes, things like that are volatile. It's possible. I mean, I don't have every terpene memorized and what their flash off points are, but my general opinion is the cooler temperatures are going to preserve those. So I try to stay below 70. I like to be 65 or lower. Actually, I don't like to be super cold though. So I don't like to, once I get down into the 50s, that's the low end that I'm not happy about. So I like to be just in the 60s, that's where I'm more comfortable. So the 70s right on the border. I'd like to see it come down a little bit, but everything else looks pretty decent.
I also feel the same way about the temperature being a little bit high.
And I'm honestly opposite of what his example was. His humidity got a little bit lower as the time went on. I'm opposite. My first couple of days, I like my humidity to be a little bit lower. So the first day of hanging, I like it to be at maybe 50%. And then I go and eyeball it and check the buds if I want to go two or 3 days with that. And my reasoning behind that is that the first couple of days I feel there's the more moisture loss from the plants. So it's like for me, I want to keep the dehumidifier that I'm running ahead of that, so it doesn't get over the 60%. And then after the first couple of days, once I see that the humidity the humidity loss is slowing down, then I'll bring it down to a 60% for the long cure. But I'm a little bit opposite of how he started out a little bit higher at 60%, and then he bumped it down to 50. I would flop that. I'd be 50% after 2 days, probably flop it to 60.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, I think. And I'd just like to add, I think Jack, our brother in absentia today, would point out that, and damned if I can't remember which it is now, but one of the terpenes he's often said starts to volatilize at 68 Fahrenheit.
I want to say it's myrcene.
Is it myrcene?
I don't know. Or
I was tempted to say that too, but it's
me
just
too.
such a prolific one. I would be surprised. I thought it was sort of a more trace one, but in any event, yeah, I'd want to be like 65 or lower. If you're setting up a space like a dedicated dry room and you've got a good budget for doing this, like in a commercial facility, you would choose to target 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And like Spartan said, you kind of want to drop the relative humidity, the absolute humidity, the moisture content in the buds kind of quicker at first and then slow down. So I like the idea of starting maybe a little bit drier, but then easing up as the moisture content was sort of lost from the buds. But the other thing, if you get too cold or not dry enough, it's just not going to dry. I mean, so we're sort of pushing a little bit towards that at when you get above 60 RH at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to be a 12-day dry or something like that. Much longer or much lower or sort of moisture than that just stretches that out a lot longer. But that's a pretty good range.
I also feel like in a lot of grow conditions, and this is totally speculation. I might be right, and I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion. But like when you're coming out of a cultivation sort of zone, not the relative humidity, but like the actual absolute humidity, like on the foliage, might be a little bit higher potentially from all that evapotranspiration and maybe the humidification or whatever you're doing. Maybe your ambient environment is like this. So if you start with the greater degree of lower humidity, to really dry that out a little bit better, I think is smarter. And I think also it might be great for like some post harvest problems like fungal growth and that kind of a thing, especially really dense dank buds. Obviously, that's going to play a role too.
Yeah.
What do you
Exactly.
think,
That's the
Tao?
danger.
Yeah, Tao.
I've really thought about that a couple times because I wondered all the time if that makes the tomatoes close up harder all over and like makes the actual plant material retain more moisture, but I don't know. So you know what I'm saying? Do you follow my logic?
It's curious. I don't understand.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
curious just to
so.
know, has anyone, I haven't seen any literature on this, but do the,
A lot of people say
after
let the plant
harvest, do the
dry out.
stomata of the leaves, are they open or are they closed?
That's what
Sure,
I'm
they
saying.
close.
I wonder if you cut them, do they stand still? I don't think that happens. So yeah, they probably either open or close depending. But I think like yeah,
Because I know the
I
plant
don't
can
know
still
about that.
process
Closed.
some,
It's a good
it can
question,
do
right? But
some
if
few processes, even if it's cut. Well, I guess it probably still need light to
you're
kick them
taking
off.
off all the fan leaves anyway, right? You're not well, I take off all the fan leaves at least. So that
Yeah, but the sugar leaves still have stomata.
right. And they have stomata and they'll let air in or out. So if you yeah, so I wonder, like if you're in a really dry spot, maybe you want those stomata closed so they like dry out slower, or would it, or does it even matter if they're closed or open on how quickly
Oh, I
it dries
wonder
out?
if,
I don't know these
I,
things.
I
I
think they
imagine that it's going to be
close.
some are open and some are closed. I don't think it's all open or closed thing. It would be sweet if
Okay.
it were,
They
but
would
Yeah, you see,
close
I
to
have thought
preserve
about it.
water.
okay. Oh
Guys,
yeah, guys, it's drying up. That would make sense.
yeah, the plant would be triggered once it got sort of cut, the stem cut, right? And the flow of water into the plant got cut off. The plant is going to respond to that by closing its stomata.
Right, that's what I figured.
Yeah, pretty
And
much regardless.
and
And
it,
it's
so
going to,
the last few days before you cut the plant, if it's really dry, the stomata most likely be closed to try and hold the moisture too, right? Anyway.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They'll won't allow as much to preserve moisture in the plant. They'll try not to, but there's also going to be a high VPD pulling the moisture away from them. So
Right. And so that plant material will still be drier if you do let it get dried out anyway. So yeah, I think it's better. And a little stress at the very end too, Matthew. I think never hurts. But yeah, I don't pay
It's curious
that
too, because it
much
depends on what your final product is, because I know there's some old
right.
hash practices to let like they don't give a fuck about the flower. So they'll let the plant die and just start almost to the point of rotting before they cut it down, because they're just looking for the cured hash on that fucking plant. And then they say that's the best hash when you get it that way. Everybody's got their own version. But
Yep.
if you're harvesting for flower, obviously you can't do something like that. You would want to, you would want to like not what was it called? It's not starve because it's not food. What do you call? Purposely dehydrate your plant before harvest?
yeah, dehydrate.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're harvesting for flower, you're better off watering it to the end. But if you're harvesting for another purpose, maybe that would be something to consider. Maybe you should let the plant dry out a little bit before you harvest it.
Yeah, it's like in cocoa, it also would depend on where your residual EC is on that. Whenever you're fertigating or adding salts in the water, if you let it dry out, you're going to spike your EC in the water that remains in the media. But if you sort of flush it out, if you do any kind of flush in advance, you can basically stop watering at that point, because it's the salt that requires, frequent fertigation. It's not the water or the ability of cocoa, for example, to hold the water. So a pretty common strategy is to flush like 2-3 days before harvest and then just stop watering. You're not actually drying out the plants because they'll still have access to plenty of water that's in the media. And you don't have to worry about it as much because there's not any salt left in the media.
Sorry, it took forever to get to my mute button. Jesus. But it's still curious to me. I wonder if anybody has done even in, I mean, it wouldn't be a long, but you could say, 2 day, just straight, let it, let the media dry out, then harvest, as opposed to water event 2-3 hours before, I mean, a saturated media harvest as opposed to a
Right. You figured someone would have
less
done that
saturated media
experiment
harvest.
already, right, Spartan?
What?
You figured someone would have done that experiment already.
I don't know. Yeah, you would imagine. There's so
It's
many
so
different factors in growing this.
right.
It doesn't surprise
I'm
me if
ready
it
to
hasn't
start
been
an
done.
institution to perform all these experiments. I'm gonna get a
Well, I can
GoFundMe.
tell you just at the commercial scale, when you go, when you're harvesting, you'll notice some pots are heavier and some pots are lighter, but I never really had the time in that situation to really compare that to each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sure people are maybe running into it, but I don't know that we're really scientifically, I wouldn't say any study that I've seen anyway
I
that's
think we
compared
can
that.
find people like out there that would swear by both. You got to water it right before you cut it. It makes it way better. And somebody would be like, no, you got to dry it out for a week. It makes it way better.
If I just had to come up with opinion and someone said, what's my opinion? I'd say, do not fucking water it right before. And just from experience of plants is like, I don't know, if I have a super heavy, just watered plant when I harvest, it just seems not as good.
I remember reading a long time ago about herbs, herbal food herbs, like rosemary, thyme, whatever.
Yeah.
And this particular thing I read or stated that you want to let the morning dew dry, and that's when the essential oils are at peak for harvesting for a peak flavor of your food herbal, those things like parsley or oregano and whatever. So I think there's something to it. Like, yeah, you want it to be dry on the surface, I would think.
Yeah.
But
That probably is
I've
directly because
harvested
of
in the
mold.
rain out of urgency because yeah, I had to. But
I
Dr.
think
Shit
that
said
really
that.
is mold, Tao. I think that, if you harvested the herbs before that and like stacked them up someplace, that would
Yeah,
be problematic.
yeah, okay.
But I think the other lesson to be sort of gleaned from that is you should harvest herbs in the morning, not in the afternoon. But yeah, after they're dry.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But just the
Yeah, like
surface.
before the sun hits it,
Before the heat and
Yeah,
sun.
right. Right.
as I
And
learned it, anyways. Yeah.
I think the same applies to harvesting cannabis.
I agree.
I wouldn't want
Yeah,
to harvest it while it was wet, but God, it
no,
shouldn't be getting wet at that time of your grow.
I think that's
You
why
don't
it
want to
makes sense
dry
for,
out the plant so much that the flowers start to shrivel. I mean,
right.
you don't want to dry out the plant even so much that the leaves start to shrivel. If you're trying to cut down the flow of water through the plant on harvest day, I think that that's perfectly appropriate. But you also got to realize the plant's going to do its level best to maintain its sort of equilibrium in terms of moisture content within itself. It will really work to not let itself get dehydrated. So, you'd have to really sort of fight against the plant in order to like actually dry it out before harvest. But I think there's a difference there and, just cutting off water a couple days in advance because if it's not suffering from a high EC situation, the plant will have plenty of water to get through a few days.
I'm reminded that when we were growing Gerber daisies, we would not irrigate the plants or as much. We still irrigate them a bit, but we wouldn't irrigate them nearly as much. And then they would snap off the crown of the plant way easier during harvest. So little fun things like that. I'm not sure how relevant that is to cannabis, but
Is that going to make trimming easier, Matthew?
no, probably not. Yeah.
It's gonna make harvesting a bitch if it's gonna be breaking easier. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're at the point where you're using hemp in a combine, I don't think that'll matter much either.
Yeah. So what else we got for questions?
We do have one, or no, we don't actually. Yeah, we I've been looking at the chat very dutifully. There haven't been a whole lot of questions. You have one?
Yeah, I have an interesting question for you guys. Just get your opinion because it's interesting and it's kind of a boring subject, so maybe we don't want to spend too much time. But there's a recent article even, and we have a conglomerate media source here in Michigan called MLive that takes all the local papers and puts them in one source. anyways, on an MLive article, they were reporting on the regulatory body here in Michigan, which has just been renamed, which this is a win, in my opinion, just been renamed from the Marijuana Regulatory Agency to the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. And it was renamed because they now also are the regulatory body for hemp in Michigan. So they, which is not so much a good thing, but so now they're regulating, both sides of the plant, because I'm not going to say they're two different plants. And but anyhow, they have the power now to they are just shutting things down and putting them on hold with no explanations. For example, they just did this earlier with an issue with a testing lab, which made sense. That's a safety issue to the public. But now this article was all about how they just shut down a bunch of product from just this one supplier. And they're calling they're using metric to flag items at all the dispensaries. And so all of their stuff is on hold. And when MLive reached out to the CRA, they said that it wouldn't be or maybe it wasn't, I can't remember who they talked to, but some expert they were talking to was saying that it wasn't for anything having to do with safety or anything like that. And it was only a hold. It wasn't something like where it failed testing, because that shows up in metric, or a safety concern, it shows up in metric. So nothing was flagged, everything had passed testing, and they're holding it for who knows what. And it's interesting because the people are saying, how can you operate as a business if they shut down everything and you have bills to pay, and they don't even give you an answer of why everything's on hold?
Maybe the feds told them they had to shut it down because they were doing some black market dealings, Spartan.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Then
Maybe
why
they
wouldn't they
just
say?
had to
the only
collect
thing
some
that would
taxes.
justify
Okay,
that
so
kind of. That was the only
so Tao, if that were the case, why wouldn't the
they
CRA
say?
spokesman
Yeah.
say this is a federal matter? It's being dealt with by the blah blah blah
That's
agency.
great.
We can't
Great
speak
point
on it or
there.
something.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just seems to be shady. Like, I'm not even in the commercial business right now. I'm a
Yeah,
free
I
agent,
haven't
right?
got too much
And I
of
still
this.
think it's crazy to try. Can you imagine trying to operate a business under that kind of guise,
Yeah,
where they can just say everything you've produced is fucking on hold? You make no money until we decide to fucking
I'm
give
sure
you a
all their
reason.
funds are like, on hold as well, and they probably got
That's just
search and
insane.
seizure. They probably seized everything those people own.
I mean, most other businesses, you have some way to appeal, have you sit in front of kind of a body or a judge or something, to where you can at least get a idea of what you're being accused of. At least this is like, we're not even telling you what you're accused of kind of shit.
Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me, because even in like a comparable situation that comes to my mind is a quarantine pest identification. LBAM, or the light brown apple moth here in California, it was and is a quarantine pest. If they find it on your land, they will shut you down potentially, following an inspection. And
Crazy.
because if it causes so much damage that it's just not tenable potentially. And so, but like they tell you, they have people come down, they tell you the situation. And I think there is actually support for businesses, because obviously that can be lethal to a company. So they're not even doing that. That's amazing to me. It's
And
very
that's the thing.
duplicitous.
It's like,
or mandate. I don't know. That's
maybe,
too strong.
obviously we're all in bubbles. We are around cannabis more than the average person for sure. But to me, it seems like, why is it that we're always picked on at the least common fucking way? It's like every move, left, right, center, we can't use banking. I mean, just silly things. And it's just like, it just compounds me that how can this kind of stuff continue to go on in the fucking supposed land of the free?
Yeah, well, just look at where we were like a decade ago, though. I mean,
yeah, that's true. I would almost argue I felt more free, though. I could almost argue I felt more free.
Yeah, yeah, but hopefully we're in a transition period, and we can all sort of sense that. Hopefully the end result of this is something that we're all comfortable living with. There's definitely, signs that it may not work out that way.
Well, I almost think this is not the anarchist in me or whatever, but it's like, I almost I almost want to see it fail. I almost kind of cringe when I see them, like I saw California like make those moves to like, oh, we're gonna remove all these fucking taxes that we shouldn't have in the first place to make it so that you guys can have a fair shake. And I'm almost thinking, why don't you just let that fucker fail? Let all the fucking legal shit fail and say, there, you get no money anymore. How about that, you idiots? You get nothing. How about that? And just let it go back to the fucking
there
way
may
it
be
was.
maybe moderately more sort of I don't know, productive ways to approach
Yeah, but
legislation.
there
But
really
yeah,
is a
I can sense the
corporate,
frustration.
it's a corporate and business socialist setup in our country. They bail out big banks, big corporations, businesses, but the little guy, well, I guess they sometimes get him bailed out, but it just seems a little lopsided. But um yeah, they should have let, and half of the operators like in Canada and stuff, they weren't in it to even try to make money. They were just, these CEOs saw the opportunity to get a like even a shell business going. They weren't trying to make profits, they were trying to make money, and then they dropped out and had all their money and let the businesses, whatever happened, a whole bunch of them got bought out and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
it has all the now it's regular business.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's all sorts of problems with capitalism, and some of them are exacerbated by in the cannabis market particular, and some of them are unique to the cannabis market, but a lot of
Yeah.
them are just sort of like general BS that
Same
comes from
story, new paint
capitalism.
job. Yeah.
But just to like, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just to wrap it up, I kind of just wanted your guys' opinion because it's a double-edged sword with this. It's like, I understand regulation is there for safety, and if there's a safety concern, by all means, they should be able to pause it like right now and stop it immediately. So, less harm gets to the end, or less potential harm, even though that's really an argument too. But less potential harm could get to the consumer. I think we do need something that can react that fast. But then to be able to just sit there and say nothing, I don't know. I don't know. I think that it's a double edged sword. I don't want to say there should be no regulation, but I think there should be kind of checks and balances or something, or some kind of a.
Yeah, it sounds like there's
Well,
not a lot of good faith or a lot of confidence in good faith on probably both parties. So
low social trust. Yeah.
yeah, there's no social trust there that they need time to investigate or something like that. I mean, who
Yeah, there should be
knows? But
a time on
it,
it.
it's yeah, I don't know.
All right. On a different note, I got a question for Matthew Gates, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know how a lot of us do the clone from a clone from a clone, like, and we don't keep like a mother plant very long. So there could be like a lot of time that that clone was cloned. And I was wondering, like, if during that time period, that clone experienced spider mites at some point, and during that time period, it experienced drought and whatever, and supposedly those things will I guess turn on certain genes, or activate certain genes. Are they activated for the extent of the entire cloning of the rest of that life of that clone?
Okay, so there's a couple of things in there, but that's a really, really cool question because it's a question that I actually have asked myself a lot, and I do lack some level of genomics understanding. I think there's a little epigenetics maybe going on there, but to I think part of what you're saying, but in general, like defense responses, defense signaling, immune pathway signaling, can it can start, within like a couple of hours of detection, whatever depending on, what it is and other factors. And it can last a few more hours. It can last like, in order for it to complete the whole process, it might start in a local area and be, and the signal gets transmitted throughout the plant, but gradually over time, maybe even for multiple days in some cases, or at least the fallout of some of those processes might last up until that point. Um,
So it's
and
transitory, not like our inflation currently.
yeah, like it won't it won't stay forever, because the defense response is costly. So plants the sort of the ecology of a lot of plant defense basically is like you've got to find, this is how it's understood at least. There's a finite pool of resources. The plant can't do everything at once in the same way, because just like you can't use 100% of your muscle strength, or you'll like rip your the threads of your own sinew away from itself. You know,
Yeah.
you have to have some moderation there. And so that basically comes down to this sort of selective receptor response system. But if they were to prime and then continue on for it, like just stay primed in that way, the things that allow the plant to defend in one context might actually make it vulnerable in another context. In the same way that if you make a material one way, maybe we can break it in this way easily, but not in this way.
Right, right. But what if we
So
looked at it? I mean,
That's
I'm not strong here either, obviously not my strong suit here either, but what if we looked at it through the lens of epigenetic changes, and maybe the stress was long enough to make an epigenetic change to the DNA that could continue on through clone after clone after clone after clone if it was
That's
some
not what
kind of a
causes
change.
epigenetic change, though. Epigenetic change is going to be random copying error
by
in the
definition. Right?
But isn't
divisions
it
of the
triggered by
cell.
some kind of outside stressor, or is it something more like it's a
I know
Nah.
there's examples of like
Parent.
histones and chromatin folding, but I would not be able to tell you about that in depth. But I don't think that's really. I think, yeah, I'm thinking of
It
like,
wouldn't.
what about the changes where it's like what do they call it, where it's adapting to your environment, and they kind of then they say that's like epigenetic changes, where if a clone or a cultivar is put in the same average environment again and again and again, it may take subtle changes over time and adapt to that environment to be a little bit more efficient in its growth. You don't think that's a thing?
there's like a neutral ecology factor there. Like I think there's like Dr. I'll let Dr. Coco explain his part. I don't want to talk for him, but I do know there's a level of like, it's kind of like we started talking about like periods of time and like kind of quote unquote, like he was saying random mutation, but I'll let you speak on that
Yeah.
more. I think you know more than me on this.
The things that you'll inherit or that sort of pass on that way, even clonally, even through vegetative propagation, and then go on to durably sort of reproduce themselves, are at the genetic level. So you're talking about sort of random changes that happens in the genetics of an individual through time, and copying error. Basically, it's not going to be a result of sort of things that happen to the organism during that lifespan. Like Matthew was saying to begin with, there are certainly responses to things that happen to plants during their lifetimes, but they won't have a durable sort of effect. They won't become inheritable either in that sense. So that's sort of how plants, if you take a clone from a clone from a clone from a clone, well through time, the end of that cloning chain is going to be a little bit different than the plant that you started with, and the differences between there are going to be largely random.
It's kind of like, remember we talked about that paper where the researcher took the clones from like the bottom and the top, and there were different copy mutations between those, and even
enough, the top ones had the most, which was interesting to me. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, right. I guess because I don't actually know the causal reason, but I think he speculated on some of them, but I don't remember in the paper. But like, and even in that case, like it was literally the case that some of the genes related to like the synthesis of certain terpenes, and certainly the cannabinoid pathway, there were mutations that happened. But in at least in that study at that time period in those contexts, it's not like it lost the ability to make THC or had like other significant cool thing happen that was like interesting. But like this happens over a period of time, I think is kind of the main sort of takeaway. Like, yeah, something like that could happen and does ostensibly happen in nature, but I don't think it'd be easy to track,
It's more of a natural selection thing. It's not
kinda, yeah.
It's randomly, randomly changing, but only the things that are randomly making it survive better stick around because those survive better in that situation. So it's not so much that it's reacting to the environment, that its random change fits into the environment better.
Right.
Yeah, but Matthew, the change in those clonal experiments was so trivial, one couldn't tell without doing the DNAs or whatever, right? Or is that
Well, you
unknown?
can't ever tell without, I mean, unless it's like really a catastrophic, um, like mutation for something really important.
Right. The clone still looked like the mother and smelled like the mother and smoked like the mother, most likely, even though it was different.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I guess my
Yeah,
point is
that's my
that
point.
those things do happen, and so you might be able to extrapolate. Although he wanted to see more research, of course, but you could presume that maybe under
Over
the right
time.
conditions
Yeah.
over time, like this is like with I mean this is kind of how domestication phenotypes happen. I was having a conversation about that recently, where how like the cannabis we grow now and the cannabis that evolved before human cultivation is starkly different, and like all in like many ways, and also like tomatoes and peppers and bananas and things. So like and they lose those traits over time, because sometimes just because of time, and those traits don't get, they aren't used, they aren't important for um what we're trying to accomplish, maybe, or at least they don't stay around. And when they get lost, like sometimes they're like resistance genes, for example, is what I think of. Like we grow, it's not that it's necessarily the case that our selection pressures cause those to happen, but essentially what happens is that those weren't as important for the reproduction of the plant, because we were making sure that they would reproduce. So the pressures for those things go away. So in that way, like maybe over time, something like that can happen, and did certainly happen with our cultivation, and will probably continue to happen as we cultivate.
Yeah, like seed dispersal mechanisms, that all wild plants have to have seed dispersal mechanisms. And at the great risk of bringing up corn again, if humans didn't replant corn every single season, there wouldn't be any left. Corn can't propagate itself. It requires now human intervention in order to disperse its seeds.
What
So
about birds? Don't they eat it and then shit it out and then there's corn growing somewhere else?
no, you
That don't
gotta
work no
try
more?
it and then remove the kernels of corn from the ear and then plant them.
Really?
Yeah, and
Someone said that's an alien plant brought to us from Anunnaki.
there's a
That's the
lot
only
of theories
plant
about
like
it.
that, right? Yeah.
For a long time they were really unsure what it was domesticated from, and there was a lot of controversy because there's no wild relative that's anywhere close to the domesticated corn that Mesoamericans were growing. And
Uh-huh.
the corn that the Mesoamericans were growing could not survive on its own. It was absolutely dependent on human cultivation. So
Bigfoot brought it to us. It was Bigfoot.
yeah. But yeah, that just sort of goes to the point. The what we select for and how plants respond to that are radically different, and plant survival becomes radically different. I mean, corn became extraordinarily successful as an organism by engaging in this symbiotic relationship with humans to do its propagation for it. I mean, we feed it, we water it, we like plow over lots of other plants in order to grow it. And this is a huge evolutionary success story from the perspective of corn. You know what I mean?
I always like to bring up that Lenape potato when we're talking about controversial domestication topics. The potato that they crossed, I think a some sort of russet potato and a wild potato from Peru, and it was really pest resistant. And when the farmer who crossed them like decided to test them out, and eat the potato, as you do, um, he got sick because it had a lot of solanine and other compounds that we've bred out of a lot of solanaceous crops.
Yep.
So it was pest resistant because it was toxic.
Yeah,
Oops.
human
And it
resistant.
wasn't like modified or anything like that. It was just natural breeding. And so like I don't know, like people think that only certain kinds of breeding techniques might have negative repercussions, and that's not true. So
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like really close to being toxic compounds in your everyday potato too, and in
true.
tomatoes, and in a lot of those things, right? So if you start messing around with the wild seeds or the wild stock, and you'll get some of those genes to express. Getting back to cannabis, this is exactly why people are interested in looking for land races and wild cannabis to cross those in, because that is sort of the stock of genetic diversity. That's the gene pool for all these interesting new sort of genes and traits that we may be able to provoke or stimulate new cannabinoids or more of different kinds of cannabinoids, or disease and pest resistance, issues like that. So
I
those
think it's
wild populations become genetic reservoirs of sort of important information. And that's true for a lot of domesticated crops.
and I think they look through hemp too. You know what I mean? Like the for example, like maybe look into
Absolutely.
the old hemp cultivars that they were just using to,
Yeah.
and you can find some weird stuff. I mean, not weird, but they selected those generation after generation on purpose because they're growing them outside for pest resistance. So I'm sure there's some good stuff there, even though they grow super tall because they have long fiber. But I mean, who cares? To breed that part out.
Yeah, exactly. There might be some other gene that you could work with, or some other terpene or some other, cannabinoid that, yeah, or it'll just sort of work in concert in a heterogenetic sequence with some other genes. There's a lot of cool things that you can develop when you back cross modern varieties to the wild populations.
Yeah, I definitely I was reading an article by Medicinal Genomics, Kevin McKernan, about this is about qPCR with hop latent viroid, and this idea of like basically it's possible that probably actually it's plausible that there are some plants for which they don't have symptoms as much, not just because the viroid is latent and has latency effects, but because it could be resistant in some way, and that just because you are detecting it in um, the test, essentially, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's super loaded. Essentially, I know that was not a very articulate way to put it for people who aren't
To
familiar.
me, it's not.
Well, they could familiarize it just like they did with the COVID.
I mean, does that mean that it can't pass it on? That it's just sitting dormant and it can't really pass it on to otherwise healthy plants? Or does that mean that's
Well, no, I
well?
don't
Then
actually
that's
know if
to
that's
me.
the
I don't care
case.
about anything else.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a point that I'm not very familiar with. I don't know if that's actually the case or not, but that did come to my mind. The other thing that came to my mind was that, which is kind of in the same vein, is like I think a lot of people should be concerned with being very cautious there. But I could totally see this being like a nursery or breeding project to take that information and maybe use it for like maybe marker assisted breeding or something like that. Um, Ostensibly, I mean, I know that with hops, their solution was to breed resistant cultivars, and basically that has really truncated what people use in the professional scape. So although I don't think that that will be true for all the plants that people grow in the future, I think that if that resistance can be found, I think people will want to know about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot of crops that are truncated because only one variety is particularly disease resistant. And it would be, you just gave me like a flash of what happens if that happens with cannabis. Like, if only Blue Dream is like disease resistant to some horrible new pest that rolls through, and like that's all we have. I mean, I'm sort of shivering.
Well,
If it's
all the
Blue Dream, I'm okay
bananas.
with that. I haven't had a lot of that one
I
yet.
chose
So.
that on purpose, but yeah, like I mean, that would be tough. But that's the world we live in with like hops, with like bananas, with a lot of
Right?
things.
Not
We only get one
bananas are all a
variety.
clone, right? From what
Although,
someone told me, that all the bananas in the supermarket that are like regular
Yeah.
bananas are from a clonal variety.
there are
Yes,
definitely some variations out there, but yeah, like basically,
the
yes.
Cavendish banana. There's
Yeah.
other types of bananas, but they don't make it to the United States in large numbers because they don't travel well. That's one of the big considerations for the banana market. You want to be able to ship these things long distance in like slow moving boats, not in airplanes.
Yeah, and it's the Fusarium tropical wilt fungus. 4, is it the race 4? I forget, but
Yeah, that's currently wiping out the Cavendish.
yeah.
Yeah, so they need to come up with a new variety of banana to replace it.
The thing that bothers me though is that Fusarium is just so dang pernicious. Like, I mean, Fusarium goes after the genus, anyways, many different kinds of species with
Yeah.
their advantages, but they go after so many plants in general. So it's not like I don't think
I wonder if they
if
would
you
do
can
something like labs, if we would teach these plantations or whatever you want to call them, just to fucking spray their goddamn trees with labs every other day or some shit.
Like
No, I mean, they've
overdose
really
that
tried a
kind of
lot of
stuff.
stuff to stop this.
Overdose.
And it's happened once before in the banana market. I mean, that's why we all eat Cavendish bananas. The previous banana, whose name is escaping me right now,
Gross
was
Michael?
but well, by all accounts, it was more delicious and better. And it was not an easy sell to switch to Cavendish, which is what everybody sort of knows as a banana.
Oh. No, I want one of those ones. Fuck.
I know.
I know,
Well,
right?
go
They
someplace
still
where they
exist.
grow bananas, man, and go to a local market and just start picking up. There's all sorts of cool plantains and bananas to sample in the world.
I obligatorily have to remind people that I have associated with the California Rare Fruit Growers Association in the past, and if you live in California or if you live in other parts of the United States, and you're interested in this kind of stuff, they have a really strong community of people who basically like cultivate rare fruits for people and to make sure they're still around. And a lot of them are damn tasty, I have to admit. Like the vanilla ice cream.
The vanilla ice cream
banana that I had this one time. Yeah, they're blue on the peel, if I remember correctly.
I gotta talk to you about this off air, Matt, because
Yes.
I'm gonna want to get some of these plants and grow some. We're all thinking about our gardens over here these days. So.
Oh yeah.
Very glad. Yeah, no, grow your own food, man, if you can, if you're able to.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I found that we can grow in Michigan. They're called vine kiwi. There's another real name for it, but I can grow like a type of kiwi, and you can just eat them. Like they're about grape size, and you can just pop them off the vine and eat them without having to peel it or anything. But it's like a kiwi flavor. I'm like, oh, I'm down. So I'm going to try to get some of those. But you got to have male and female so they pollinate. So I get like 3 plants, 2 females and a male, and then start trials. So it's going to take about 2 years, I think it said, before you get fruit. But I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's fun to work on a project like that for a few years and then finally get to taste the fruit. You know what I mean? That's going to be a tasty fruit. Yeah.
And I just love kiwi anyway. That flavor is just, I always loved it.
Yeah. Everybody put your fruit and veggie gardens in. It is that time of year.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we got snow coming in a couple of days, so I'm going to wait a little bit.
We're biased, admittedly.
Heat mats in the first place and humidity domes and stuff, right? For your spring starts in places like Michigan.
Actually, on the note of like interesting little points about cultivation, I did say that I had a small little thing I wanted to share. And so unless somebody wants to mention something related to that topic, because I know the feeling. I hate to do that when you have it on the tip of your tongue, you're waiting patiently to express it, and then topic changes. So
and then it's like, okay, now we're going to talk. And it's like, no, I think you're good, Matthew. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then let's see here. So I'm just going to share my screen. This is I have a presentation on Tuesday on the Future Cannabis Project FCPO2 channel, where I've been doing a lot of different pest-oriented videos and presentations where you can learn just about everything you want to know about them and a lot more, so that you can be really forearmed to know about them. And so this is sort of an advertisement for that, but it's also where I get to talk about some topics that are really important to me. So the presentation here is about fungus gnats in general. But one topic I wanted to make sure that I went over for people, because I know there's a lot of people who are trying to be very ecologically conscientious with how they're cultivating, to not harm and even to facilitate organisms in their environment that have been there for thousands of years and are really important for the betterment of that local ecosystem. And people don't know this, so I'm going to tell you. Flies, believe it or not, are, after bees, the biggest group of pollinators in the insect world, which also means the animal world. And fungus gnats, believe it or not, are one of those groups. So there's the fungus gnat species that we normally go after as pests, like the Berdesia species is a big one. The Cyara species, there's a few in there that are a problem, and you probably won't be able to tell the difference between those. But on the left here, there's a picture of various fungus gnats collecting pollen on these flowers, and there's actually several different fly species in the pie chart at the bottom right that they go over. They also go over a couple of other organisms. I think they have, yeah, beetles and ants and moths as well. But yeah, as you can see, there were a lot of Cyaridae, which is that pink color, and a lot of Mycetophilidae, which is that sort of darker purplish color. And those are collectively often referred to as the fungus gnats. So, like, it's kind of awkward, I know, and most people think, like, how am I going to tell the difference? But you probably won't be. But I wanted to get up on my soapbox a little bit and say that there's like 2,600 species of these things. And just because you might see something that looks like a fungus gnat on your property, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be something that will harm your plants. I was really going to show only one slide, but actually that didn't work. Let me, it isn't, here we go. I was just going to say here that, where is it? What did I forget? Oh, I'm stalling out. I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, so like basically, I just want you to, the graph here basically shows like ancestry and descendants as a phylogenetic map. And as you can see, the green are the species where the larvae feed on like living plants. And the Berdesia group that I mentioned earlier is in this group. That's the green line. But as you can see, most fungus gnats, they feed on rotten wood and plant litter. They're not interested in your plants. And this is like the ancestral larval feeding ecology. So like, and a lot of times fungus gnats even vector the spores of the fungi that you want to find foraging out in the environment. Because they lay their eggs on like decaying wood, and then they pass the spores onto that wood, and they, basically sporulate the wood. And the fungus gnats there too, eating the decaying wood, and there's a symbiotic relationship. So I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting thing. If you want to learn, obviously, treatments and detection strategies, we can go over that as well. But yeah, like, yeah, here's the graph I was saying. Here's the bees.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's
if you want to put that into perspective. Yeah, so the Diptera is the flies, the Coleoptera is the beetles, and the bees, wasps, ants, and sawflies are the Hymenoptera. And yeah, so this was just
that many fucking bees. That's a lot of damn bees.
There's so many. They're not just honeybees. Most bees are solitary and endangered. So, but they don't get the attention that the honeybee does because they don't make honey, which is sad.
Well, they better get
yeah, right. The blowflies here at the bottom, they're obviously the larvae eat, carrion, decaying animal bodies and stuff like that. But they're a critical pollinator. So I don't know. I'm not saying you should let that be on your farm property or anything like that, but just try not to be indiscriminate in your pest killing, because you might harm something that's super important. And
I noticed the Lepidura are okay to fucking destroy, so I can continue to hate on them. Especially outside.
Especially if they're like, there's so many of them out there. So, and a lot of them that are endangered don't actually go after our crops. So,
yeah, but they're still really icky either way. So icky,
or
or they get in my buds and make bud rot. So one or the other. I hate either one.
We should get someone else to do our dirty work.
Like
Who do you
drones,
have in mind?
like miniature drones.
I don't know, but like predator mites for spider mites and maybe those nematodes. What
Wait a
would
minute.
you
Did you say
suggest?
spider mites? Let's not get spider mites involved. Let's not breed them.
Nematodes for the fungus gnats then. Fungus gnat
Yeah.
larva? Is that what you need?
Well, Matthew was
Oh
just trying
yeah.
to make a case to save the fungus gnats, is what
Yes,
that
the
was all
fungus
about
gnats
right
are our
there.
friends. That's my point. Just suck them up gently with a like a baby vacuum cleaner. Let them free out in the wild, Spartan.
No, if they're attacking your plants, I think self-defense is necessary.
So
But don't go searching for that battle necessarily.
they're
And
coming
just
right
use a
at
little bit of
us.
context.
So
Oh, by the way,
defense is okay,
Noah,
but don't go on offense. Is that what
Yeah,
yeah,
we're-
we can
don't
treat
go
our
looking for the
gardens,
fight
but
in
not
like the
past that.
forest. Yeah.
don't go picking fights with insects in the woods. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I play a lot of Japanese role-playing games, and that's typically good advice anyways. But Noah the Groa is here. I don't know if he's yeah, here we go.
How's it
How are
going,
you?
everybody? Yeah, sorry I was a little bit late there with the Easter festivities, and yeah, I'm here. And how's everybody doing?
Welcome, Noah.
So Noah, good to see you, man.
Yeah, we were just talking about fruits and vegetables and breeding of plants and the cannabis immune system before that, and I was on my soapbox talking about how not to kill every single insect and trying not to be unreasonable about it. But how are you doing? Do you have any cool subjects you'd like to mention?
No, I seen a little bit of that subject matter on your Instagram page. I was looking at that this week, and no, I was just jumping in with all you, and I was listening to the conversation when I got here. I don't really know where you guys are at, but I can catch up pretty quick.
I think we're right at a transitionary point.
I was
Did
saying, when
anyone
you
see
catch
any
up, catch
questions?
me up, because I'm lost already.
I actually haven't been seeing any questions in the chat lately. So if anyone does have questions, they should definitely put them in.
One interesting topic that me and Dr. Coker were talking about actually on a call just with each other was how a lot of times, or how interesting at least it is, at least in my experience and in his experience, that we really don't see a whole lot of organic cultivation in the regulated market at all. And that it's like almost exclusively when it comes to commercial production, it's almost, I don't want to say it's guaranteed, because there's Brandon, of course, he's at the commercial scene doing organics. But I mean, it's like, it's becoming a trend almost that 9 out of the 10 cultivation places that go up are all like, they're going the, what's the opposite of I can't think of the word. I'm thinking neutral. But
Conventional?
no, like
Synthetic.
not synthetic, but yeah, synthetic, but super clean, super sterile. They're going like
Oh, you mean,
more
I was
and
gonna
more
say,
sterile.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
of the they claim. Well, I hear a lot of people say it's because of they have micro that they
Microbial
test for
testing.
micro. Yeah, micro.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm
That's a big part of
I
it, but it's
personally
also it's
am really
controlled. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
I think it's the control you get, because with synthetic feed, you can control the exact mineral that you're bringing in at what time, and at the same time, by keeping it sterile, you're not worrying about all of the microbial things that attack your plant that you wouldn't want there anyway. And
Yeah.
so it's, instead of saying I'm not gonna try to pick what microbial that's good or bad, I'm saying fuck microbials, eliminate that as an issue, and try to get this down. Like, it's almost like a scientific approach. You know what
It
I'm
is.
saying?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I agree. It is a scientific approach. I think, some of the goals in commercial cultivation are a little bit different. Some of the conditions are a little bit different too. I think as home growers, we can make decisions to grow in ways that sort of aren't efficient in an economic sense, or potentially in other senses too, because we can pursue other types of goals. But it's going to be really hard under you know, at scale with intense light to keep up with production. And, you know, most commercial facilities aren't just sort of synthetic, they're growing with cocoa. And
Yeah,
there's
sure.
like a reason for that. I was talking to a rep from a big light company that deals primarily in the commercial side of the market. And he said that, you know, 80% of their growers that are just crushing it are growing in cocoa. And I asked him about like, well, what percent, what's the rest? Rockwell? He's like, oh, maybe 10% are growing in Rockwell. And, you know, we do have a few organic guys. And I asked him, I'm like, are any of the organic guys able to keep up with the cocoa guys for yield? And he said, no. And that's the answer. I mean, for a lot of things, it's time to harvest and yield considerations. It's being able to be really consistent and being able to meet the plant's needs under pretty intense production conditions. You know, elevated CO2 and ultra high density light.
And you can like set a formula or an SOP. You can set an SOP, a fertigation, we'll say a fertigation SOP that you can train somebody in a week who didn't know it before, and they know how to do it. Good luck doing that in organic side. I mean, maybe you do, maybe you can have it, but I mean, I think organics takes a lot longer to try to teach people an SOP, whereas it just seems it's repeatable. Everything seems way better, easily more repeatable when you have because you're in control of all the inputs more.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons that I think Cocoa for Cannabis, our website and the book and all that have been successful because, yeah, it's repeatable. I mean, I write down sort of recipes and protocols to follow. I tell you when to water based on what time of day it is. I mean, not based on any kind of sort of conditions within the plant itself. You know, in organic growing, there's a lot of expertise that's required. I often think that when I listen to Brandon talking, I'm like, this stuff's complicated, and I'm like good at it, but it's complicated. It can be a lot simpler, a lot easier to train a staff for, a lot easier to train yourself for, and you know, to be able to really dial in conditions and get really high growth rates, really good, you know, yields per volume of space. Yeah.
I just wanted to put my 2 cents in for cocoa as well, because I everybody looks at me as like the organic guy, and that's how I grow at home. And that's how I prefer to grow. But in a commercial space, I'd rather grow, you know, in cocoa. And I've literally have grown way more plants synthetically than I probably ever will grow organically. Who knows? Unless I start getting, you know, acreage or something. But there's definitely advantages on both sides. And I don't know, I see so much division in the cannabis field, and everybody wants to pick sides on things. And it's like, there's room for everything. And I think you got to look at it more like each way and each method is like a tool in your toolbox that you can pull that's going to have an advantage in a situation. That if you learn that, if you want to continue to grow, you might be in a situation where that's the best way for you to grow. So I think it's better to embrace all the different ways and then try to plug them into the best situation than it is to pick a side forever and just be, you know, laser focused on one side and never, I don't know, never experience the other sides too.
Personally, I just feel that the sort of onerous taxation on the product at a commercial level, I can kind of see the logic in some cases, but to be honest, I think that's the fact that I'm sure it's not the primary reason, but it certainly doesn't make it easier for them to maybe lower prices, or commercial groups to like try to be more affordable, or maybe even not be as intense, you know,
See,
or intensely chasing those margins. I don't know.
But I just want to, I mean, that's not been my experience at the commercial level. Is at the commercial level, they're very generous at those price points. And it was I mean, like some of the stuff at the commercial level, I was being shocked as a home grower. Be like, I wish I could get it for that price. It is pretty cheap when you're getting a lot of it at a time. Those price, and you're cutting out the middleman, you're cutting out the grocery store, You know what I mean? It's usually you're coming right from a supplier.
Oh,
Those
if it's
price
in
points
that
come way
context,
lower.
yeah. Oh, I would agree in that context, absolutely. In some places, though, I think that it's applied a little bit differently. But you're right. It might not be the case in all situations, and I do have a certain level of like, I don't know, resentment that like you kind of have to, it's sort of basic business, right? There's a sort of competitive attitude, but I don't know, it gets the best of us sometimes, that hustle.
Well, I just want to mention that if you're going to start growing in cocoa, you should check out Cocoa for Cannabis and follow Doc's recipe or whatever fertigation policy, because there's many people that I've come across. Like my first grow, I killed it. I did exactly what Dr. MJ Coco said, and they killed it. So I know that's a great resource.
Thank you very much, Todd. I appreciate that. Yeah.
No, I mean, look, Doc, I'm amazed how many people have like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what they did. They're like, and it's amazing. They all did awesome, and they all praise you. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me because the cocoa does most of the work. I just got to tell people how to use it, and they love it, and then I get a lot of the praise. So it's I appreciate all the grower love from the Cocoa for Cannabis community and everybody else. But you guys are out there growing the plants yourselves too, so the praise goes to the growers.
Yeah, I mean, after all, that's what makes the community a community.
Absolutely. But the other thing that Spartan mentioned to me on that call that we had was that, to the extent that, home growers want to be able to get jobs like he had in the commercial industry and go into that side of things and make that your career, having knowledge on that side, being aware, most commercial facilities are actually growing in cocoa. And to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of them could make improvements in how they're growing in cocoa. They don't all have it dialed in as well as they could. They're not all sort of following our articles and stuff. But if you get good at that kind of stuff, I mean, the commercial facilities that I've talked to are always looking for experienced growers that can fill those kind of roles. And yeah.
And that area is still like the .com area and the .com era, where if you have a little bit of knowledge, there's going to be, a lot of facilities opening up that are looking for people with some knowledge, because it's emerging. And so I don't know how long that window is going to be, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But even if you set one plan aside that you wanted to learn cocoa in or some kind of synthetic feed, DWC, whatever, but it's usually a cocoa situation is probably your best bet of what you're going to see in a facility. Learn some cocoa and see if you can, you can even grow clones of the same plant next to each other, one in cocoa and one in the way that you are now, and see the differences. And maybe they'll just give you the experience, so you're not so much informed material when you walk into a place.
Yeah. Awesome. I am enjoying this topic, but I feel a little bit sort of like almost embarrassed by the praise. So we have any other questions from the chat? We're starting to call our questions from our chatters today.
I have a question. Are you guys legitimately concerned that that commercial cultivation will continue and home grow will be stifled?
Yes.
I know that's a downer question, but
I mean, yeah, I think that's one of the big issues of the MCMA, right? This is one of the problems with the way that cannabis can become legalized. And when big institutional players start making lots of money at something, they want to be able to sort of corner that market and drive more customers into that market. And it's duplicitous because, if a big tomato started advocating to outlaw homegrown tomatoes because like they transparently just wanted to be able to sell tomatoes to all those people that are growing their own tomatoes now, people wouldn't put up with that. But there's a lot of efforts to restrict home grow that are funded by big cannabis that, you know, make up other excuses about why they need to restrict home grow in order to, you know, sort of put some sugar on that otherwise ugly pill. So yeah, I think we need to be vigilant as home growers. I think we need to really pay attention to what's going on in the legal regime, to not take the rights that you have or the privileges that you have for granted, and to recognize, you know, we're still in the process of sort of crafting cannabis's legal sort of place, or its place in our legal regime. And there's a lot of money behind the other side of that, the big cannabis side of that wants to be able to profit off of this, both on the industry side and on the government side, both by creating sort of artificial monopolies or by creating large tax burdens. And none of that's going to be particularly helpful to the future of cannabis as a medicinal and as a recreational crop.
Well, I
Same.
could say I just recently looked into New York because they just allowed, I mean, they just like issued licenses for growing for this year to I think 6 different cultivation sites, but they were all had to be previous hemp, part of the hemp grower farm bill to first get the license. And what's even more what's worse, well, I don't know if that's bad or not, whatever. But and I'm sure it was a lot of money, and it cost $2,000 non-refundable just to fill out the application for like one of the you know, licenses. But I'm sure it's more for other ones. But the other thing that the first thing that they'd said when the new, what happened was Cuomo got fired and the new mayor came in. She started moving on the medical marijuana. I mean, on the new recreational marijuana laws right away. And she said the first thing we're going to do is have medical patients be able to grow their own. But she never defined it. They never passed it finally. So they still can't grow. No one could grow weed yet, but except for those that got the commercial license. And they already stated that for recreational growing, it's going to have to be at least 1 year after the dispensaries are open commercially selling it. So that's the stipulation they already have in for New York State. So if yeah, as soon as they, you know, hammer out the medical thing, I'm gonna go. I might have to go get a medical card from New York State just so I can have that at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's starting, and then again, how many people haven't paid attention to the laws anyway? I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I just want to say that's all true, and I agree with everything but both you guys are saying. But there's also a light at the end of the tunnel, because cannabis is a little bit different than a lot of other industry in that we've had to have activists already to get to where we're at. So there's already kind of that network in place in each of these areas that has some sort of legalization, that they're kind of being watchdogs. And they try to get the word out. I try here in Michigan to help in those efforts. I'll share a quick story real quick because it looks like we have some time anyway. One of the things I've done on my time off is I ran out and I've been testifying in front of local municipalities. I was in Birch Run testifying out there to council that was trying to impose a caregiver ordinance, and that was a great one. We even had some caregiver groups come out with a mobile billboard truck that was putting some unflattering pictures up by the street so people could see one of the members. This is where one of the members flipped off the activists that were testifying on how cannabis was helping them medicinally. So we spread the word and it got to local news and all that good stuff. And we showed up to this and we protested before the meeting and we talked during the meeting. And I stood up and shared my thoughts. A lot of people stood up and shared theirs. We packed the building, and by the end of it, they killed the ordinance, and now there's no ordinance there. So there's still hope. I mean, there's still groups out there that are watching these things that are trying to be done. So it's not like there's no hope. There's people out there still doing it, and people can do that themselves too.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hope, and frankly, Spartan, you're an inspiration. So everybody should follow Spartan's lead on this. If this is something that,
Thank you.
that you're passionate about, which like I mean, I couldn't even finish that sentence because we're all passionate about cannabis, and we should all be probably equally passionate about like not going to jail for cannabis and being able to get jobs in the industry if we want to in cannabis and being able to grow our own cannabis and all of these things. But that's on the table right now in a lot of places. I mean, quite literally, it's on the table, and other people are making those decisions. But you can get your voice into those conversations. And if you're curious about how to exactly do that, ask Spartan Grown. He gives you his email address and everything else, and the guy's just an inspiration.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. And I don't know, it's like I get time in my hands, so it's like I can pursue the things that I'm super passionate about, and so that's, I jump at the chance. And I mean, it was a bit of a drive, but it was about an hour and a half for me to get there, but I got there, and it was so worth it to share in a win, because usually in those meetings you come out with, oh, we'll table it and we'll make some changes, and then you got to go back, and it's one of those things. But this one, the way it worked out, it just got killed. So that was a fucking win. Now they have to rewrite the whole damn thing if they want to do it again. So it's going to be a while at least. Put out one fire that we know is going to be out for a while. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna,
and like with any political issue, talk to your friends and family and other people that vote. You probably know people that are on the other side of these issues. I mean, you can do a lot of sort of that local networking, and that's how politics happens. That's how movements get built for organizations. I mean, we see a lot of that going around for all sorts of different movements in our country right now. But let's feed into the cannabis movement.
And if there isn't one, you can create one. Social media makes things so easy to start organizing groups, and before you know it, you have a movement.
and it's a snowball effect for sure. You're not going to see necessarily, anyways, that's sort of an immediate response, but like, a bunch of tiny hammers, will move this mountain. And I definitely empathize with the sentiment, and sometimes I even share it, that I want to turn my back away from that social or political process because it's frustrating or sort of seemingly lacking in progress. But that's not, like Dr. Coco says, it's not actually how the change happens. And I think that retreating away from it just allows other people, other entities and agents with their own agenda to fill that space. So like a beneficial microbe, you want
Yes,
to
Matthew. So
you want to be
man,
there. You want to
can't
keep that
agree
from
more.
happening.
That is so fucking true. It's amazing how true, man. I go to talk to lawmakers, and the only voice they've heard about cannabis is the other side, like a snake in the ear, and they just regurgitate the one thing they heard, and you're just like, it's like when people come to you with bro science, and you're like, no, stop, no. It's like, show me one scientific book that says any of that. And you have to just fight through all that misinformation. It's almost worse than if you just got to them before you said, have you heard about cannabis, and they said no, and then you could at least give them some information that they could check into if they wanted to. But they don't check
I would
into
love
it,
to
that's
meet
for
that
sure.
person. I want to meet that
100%.
person. Have you heard about cannabis? And they say no, and I'd be like,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Let me tell you about it. Yeah.
I have some movies you should watch. No,
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. And like, I mean, you saw, it's part I know that you saw, I think everyone on this panel, I think, saw the post I made like a few weeks ago, where that I even forget what level of the government this person's title can be ascribed to, but she was saying that she was like, I don't know, man. Either it's, she was proposing that if people were to sow cannabis seeds in like wheat fields, you get some sort of plant hybrid. And
Yes, I
yeah,
saw that, Matthew. She
that
was
was
like,
amazing.
Tried it, doesn't work.
is the weed under
Yeah.
the ground? And I plant my wheat with a weed and the wheat combined to make
Weed
a
and wheat, yeah.
Weed, yes.
I think she was thinking maybe it was perennial. I don't know,
Wheaties?
man, but that was way there's obviously some ignorant people on the subject, like to the extent of mind-baffling ignorant.
It was amazing. Yeah, I mean, like there's two main ways to respond to that, right? One is that the person just doesn't know a lot about agriculture, or the person is like intentionally misrepresenting it. But in either case, that's not very endearing.
I disagree. I think there's only one way to respond to that. We all have to try. We all have to go out there, take some cannabis seeds, plant them in wheat fields, and see what
You're
happens.
right.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? I've never heard
This
this
is how
experiment.
memes
Let's
start.
do it.
Yeah, like this is. I'm excited about it actually. Now I'm like, I see this going well. No.
This is a consummate scientific approach that I can get behind. Yeah, maybe we can get some funds for it. Maybe we could sell one less F-35.
You know what? We should make sure.
Fund the entirety of the breeding
No, we
program
should
for the
pop
next
the
2 years.
seeds. We should pop the seeds inside and make sure we sex them and make sure we have a male and female that we put out next to each other, just so we can have both sex represented. And then do this at
yeah.
least in every state, in every county, at least one time when it's really windy. I think
We
that's
have
a
to
good
run some
idea.
controls because we need to know if the offspring have a wheat
Oh,
mother
excellent.
and
At least 12
cannabis
or 13.
father, or the other way around.
Don't you think at least 12 or 13 different at least?
Yeah.
What we should do, the places where that's not allowed is where we should do the experiments, because they're going to be a better, and then we'll just do
they
the
can
places
use
that
that
are
data
okay.
to craft new law. They need that the most, so we need to do it in those states.
Good times. Yeah, no, there's a lot of sort of baffling ignorance out there. And when you meet baffling ignorance, try to be kind and just try to explain how you see those issues in the world. But yeah, you can chuckle to yourself later.
Honestly, this is going to sound terrible of me, but I honestly, in my head, when I get to people like that I know have no idea about cannabis, but they have the wrong idea about cannabis, and they're a lawmaker or something like that, or a council member, I honestly treat them like my kids when they were in middle school and I was giving them the drug talk. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Right.
I'm open for any question you have. You know what I mean? Anything. I'm not going to be mad at you. And this is
This is a safe space.
Yeah, this is a safe space. And these are the facts that I can tell you. And this is my experience. Not only am I a home grower, I did it commercially, blah, 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 blah. I'm an educator in the field. I'm just here to give you the right information. Please ask me any question. When you come to them like that, they're interested, they're engaged with you. But if you come to them as like, you stupid idiot, this is the dumbest thing, they close down. They're not listening to a word you say. So you got to be a little smart
what happens. How do you respond when they hit you with, so what's your take on all of these, cannabis plants growing in with the wheat and creating, wheat cannabis hybrids that's getting into our kids' bread supply?
I'd say, please show me where that happens, because that's scientifically impossible. And if you can show me how that isn't scientifically impossible, I'm super interested in this thing.
Yeah.
That's how I would say it.
Yeah. It's not that far off the wall, I'm sure, from some of the questions that you actually field.
Oh, just ridiculous stuff. Even like the idea of like they had no like insight on how big a plant can be, or things like that.
These are the people that are setting the plant counts, right?
Yeah, I was like, you understand that your plant counts really mean nothing as far as the quantity that I can harvest. In fact, a plant I can get outside to harvest, 10 times what I can on inside in a smaller space. And how I can do that is just grow it longer, which you can do with these plants because they have they're determined by their light cycle, and they're just look at you like doe-eyed, like what? And like, so this is a regulation that really means nothing. If you had like a square footage that would, like they've done in California, not that I'm advocating for that, but it does make more sense on how much it's more of a restriction on the quantity that's going to come out of there than an arbitrary plant count.
No, arbitrary plant counts just sort of, you have to plan for them and then grow to them or whatever. But yeah, they don't make a lot of sense. And they've always seemed to be passed by lawmakers that don't really understand how plants grow. Not just this plant, but like plants, because like most plants, you can grow them to be larger or smaller. I guess there's a lot of perennials or annuals that you wouldn't, but
But still, they don't understand the point that like physical space is your limitation. It doesn't matter how many plant count is in there.
Well,
I guess, yeah.
Sorry for my example again, but corn, it would matter. I mean, if you had a plant count of like,
That's true.
20,
You can't veg corn for long.
yeah, it's just gonna be one ear of corn you're gonna get from each corn plant anyways. And it may be just a simple worldview of cannabis like that, where they're thinking of it like a crop like that. But otherwise it doesn't make much sense. I mean, it should absolutely be square footage restrictions, not, or area restrictions, not plant count.
Yeah, you're right. They're thinking of like a vegetable plant that they put one seed in every year. They do that. They get the same result, but that's not really. But that's not cannabis.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's more like growing a peach tree or something. If you have a really big one, you're going to get a lot more peaches than if you have a tiny little baby one.
A dwarf one, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Rocinante's question. He asked it just a second ago. Will mass commercial production of cannabis kill home grow? I think it'll change it to a certain extent. But I know a lot of people that still brew their own beer, even though the mass legalization and mass production of beer is pretty much a thing. I mean, you can go and buy a 6-pack for a lot less than some of my friends spend brewing their own beer. But they'll swear by the quality and the experience, and it's their hobby, and it's something that they really enjoy doing. And damn, yeah, they're making better beer than what you're going to buy in the liquor store, right? So it's going to be the same thing to a large extent, I think, for home grower. Once mass production on the commercial side reaches in sort of the scale that the prices really come down a lot, it would be more expensive for you to grow your own cannabis potentially than to buy it. But it's more expensive for you probably to grow your own tomatoes in a lot of situations. And
I was gonna bring that same thing up. And peppers, people still grow peppers like crazy.
Yeah, because there's other benefits.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to be growing some peppers right now, very soon. In fact, in a few months, I'm going to be planting some
my buddy
rare, exquisite, exotic peppers.
Are they ornamentals, or are they?
I will probably have to do a few of those, just so that I can make videos about the process, because it's long and onerous. But yeah,
my buddy Baked, he ordered like a whole variety of ornamentals, and we're gonna pop them all. So it'd be cool to see.
I would love to help you out with that. Did you have something you were going to say, Dr. Coco?
Well, I was just still thinking about that. The group that it's going to hurt, the quote unquote home crew, or the people that are in our community that would hurt, or the people that are growing in the black market, the people that are doing sort of, black market grows of one size or another, because there's still a lot of room for doing that, making money in today's legalization regime. I mean, everybody that complains about taxation fails to recognize how much space that creates for the illicit market. When the price collapses in the legal market, you're not going to be able to sort of make a supplementary living probably growing your own cannabis. But I still think people would grow their own for themselves. I don't think you're going to make a lot of money growing for others at that point.
I have a different view. I've thought a lot about this quite a few times. I know a lot of people that have been involved in black market their whole lives and stuff. And you can just take a look at the market over in Oregon right now. It's pretty low, but I think that if they were to make it like federally legal, like basically like whatever, like avocados or oranges, or let's just give an example. Yeah, I think I don't even think that. I think for sure it would crush home growers, and I don't think it would just crush home growers. I think it would probably crush a majority. I would say 50% plus of the legal market that exists right now, because the real reason, and the United States would lose a lot of money.
Well,
and
what
I'll
do you mean
explain
by
why.
home growers there? Are you thinking about somebody like yourself that's growing a bunch of plants, or somebody like me that's growing 110 and I'm consuming most of mine myself?
Across the board, because check it out. You can grow tobacco in a lot of places. Do you know that? Well, you don't know anybody who does. People don't grow tobacco. I mean, and this is a generalization. Of course, people do, but they don't. And like you said, if you guys that brew beer, I guarantee you, if 1,000 people listen to this podcast, there's maybe a few, 5 that brew beer, right? So it's going to impact it to that level. And the main thing that the United States is going to lose is going to be the infrastructure.
No, hold on though. Before you get, I wonder if the number of people that homebrew outnumber the number of people that grow their own cannabis.
I
I
was
think it
Oh
does.
no, no way, no way.
I don't know about that.
I would say a better
Yeah,
comparison to that though is tomatoes or peppers, because we're talking about plants
Right.
more than
Hold
brewing.
on,
Brewing
hold
is more
on.
involved than just growing a plant.
Hold
in my
on.
opinion.
I think you all are underestimating the power and the greed of the federal and state governments to continue to tax it to the point where
yeah,
the
exactly.
black market guy might have a chance to make money.
Well, that's exactly what I
That's an
said. I
excellent
mean,
point.
the high taxes are
Excellent
creating
point.
the space for the black market right now.
That's right now, but I think it will continue even if the federales get involved because they'll want a piece of the pie, won't they?
Yeah, I think that that's entirely possible.
Well, they'll
That there
definitely
will
add
still
at
be room
least.
because of legal restrictions.
They were already talking. What was it, 6% already, or 3 or 6%, somewhere in that range. So they're going to absolutely put another piece on the pie, which is going to keep the prices up a little bit.
Well, that's kind of why that last law that just got passed from the Senate or the House or whatever that was, I sat down and read that, and it basically was kind of like to decriminalize it. And the reason behind that, and you would think, oh yeah, that's what the way it should be, and it probably should. But what that does is makes it so it can't be like avocados and oranges because they won't be able to ship it over the sea, with the way that law was written, because that's how a lot of the money is going to be made. A lot of the money that's made in the United States from growing weed is not what you think it is. It's not from the guy growing a weed. It's from the infrastructure. It's from the guy that grows the grow lights. It's from the nutrient company. It's from the land that gets taxed and gets grown on, the guys that build the grow ops, etc. And you
That's just
lose
gonna
Shovels and
die.
all of it.
pickaxes, right?
You lose
That's-
all of that if it gets shipped overseas.
that's
and
a
that's why
good-
they're not going to do that.
Yeah, that'll
But
be a
do you
good
think-
metric. If you just look at grow stores, as you see grow stores close, that's telling you the home growers are going away in those areas. And I think those will be the first ones you'll see if that's going to be a squeeze and people get out of it. You're going to see grow stores that immediately start, because I don't know, around me, I got like 2-3 in my town alone.
Yeah, but you have really good
Yeah,
laws
there's other
there.
things that could drive the demise of brick and mortar retailers, though, Spartan. I mean, I think
Yeah, it already has in my area. Like
When it comes to our stuff, though, it's so heavy that I think it's kind of like a little bit of insulation, whereas that there's still an advantage to be able to go into a place and not pay shipping.
100%.
I can believe
but
it.
it's already this. I guarantee you that home growers. Okay, so let's just take for when, I don't know, when did Michigan legalize for recreational marijuana?
Recreational was it was early. I mean, not that long ago, like 2012 to 2015, somewhere in that area.
Right.
2008 was the medical program was started. 2008 was the earliest we could.
Okay, so I don't know. I've never been to Michigan, so I could just tell you from my experience in the Portland, Oregon area, right off the bat, the price of good weed was $40 an eighth. It is much less than that now. That's because of the recreational legalized. So you can just look and see that has already, it's cut it in half. You can Google this. These are facts. So, and the same thing will happen if it becomes like tomatoes. It will, I would think that it would do the same thing. So like if the price of weed is like, let's just say 20 an eighth for good weed, it would go to 10. And I think it would, that's what, 50%. I think it would cut off 50% minimum.
So what I see happened here, it was kind of very similar to what you said, but a little bit different. So there was really like 3 price points. It was like the cheapest shit that you didn't want to touch. There was a small market. There was a small market that was out there. There's a big fat mids market that everybody wanted that was fucking reasonably priced. And then there was the upper market for the special shit. The upper market has stayed the same, and all the mids squeezed way the fuck down, and it's all the fucking bottom. So it's great. I'm not saying the quality changed. I'm just saying the price has changed. So
that is,
I think the top part it hasn't changed much. You're still getting the same.
Dude, you're right. You're right, and that's why I have been preaching. You can look back at any of these shows I do. I always preach quality over quantity all day long. And you're right. That is right. That's why it's important for shows like this to teach guys to build and grow the best, because you still will. If you can grow really good weed at home, it will be cheaper. You're right about that. You are right. I'll give you that.
That's just kind of what happened here. I imagine.
Same here. You're right.
The
You
whole
are right.
price structure behind cannabis has really been supported by prohibition in the first place.
True.
I mean, all the prices
True.
that we understand have been supported by prohibition. So to the extent that we don't like prohibition, I mean, we can't also then expect that the prices to stay that high. So one of the big things that's changed with the black market isn't even, well, it is, but even without considering sort of the role of the prices and the taxes and what the legal weed is selling for, the risks in the black market production have come down in the last few decades.
I couldn't agree with that more.
And as a result, the costs come down. The cost of entry is lower, and so there's less of a risk premium on that behavior, and that's one of the reasons that the price is lower. For all sorts of workers, and coming at this from the perspective of just like agriculture, being a farmer is not a well-paid job anywhere for anybody. I mean, except if you're farming, an illegal drug. And the only reason that you're sort of well paid for that, it's not because you're farming, it's because of the legal risk that you're taking. And we're in this weird transition now that a lot of commercial outfits are still able to get like pretty high prices relative to the cost of production. I mean, most farms can't sell their product for 10% more than the production cost. I mean, if they can get 10% more than their their total production costs, they consider that like a huge win for most agricultural production. And, commercial cannabis farms are getting like 5-6 times their production costs back in some points. And it's certainly, black market growers have been used to being able to get 5-6 times their production costs back from the sale of their product. That's just not normal. That's just not how plants trade in our economy. There's no other plants that sort of trade for that premium above their production costs, unless there's a legal risk.
Hey, Doc, do they grow any other agricultural products indoors under lights?
In some places, only where energy is cheap.
Lettuces,
They do a lot of indoor vegetable horticulture in Iceland, for example. Because they have geothermal electricity and they don't have a lot of sun. So they actually produce a crap ton of fruits and vegetables in Iceland under, hydroponic conditions, indoor artificial lighting.
Right, and it's not excessive amounts of money, right?
Yeah, because of cheap energy. There is some in Europe, but it's limited more by energy there. There's really not a lot in the United States. I mean, in talking to lighting manufacturers, they basically don't even consider the other crops it's all cannabis. The other crops that people might be buying these lights for is probably, 1% of their market.
So, you know what? I would say to all the cultivators that want to continue, you just got to quadruple production and half the cost, and you might be all right. That's all.
Done.
But you got to come to that realization, right?
Yeah. Okay. I want to respond real quick. So you're right. There is more niche because it's indoors. That is a very big variable, so there is a few little, quirks to this that, it's also here. I'll say something else. Hey, you're right about the farmers over getting screwed for a little while. That's right. And let's see how let's wait till we have this conversation a year from now, because I think there's going to be a realization real quick that farmers are a little bit more essential than people think. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a tightening of the belt when it comes to food market. And I think that's
historically,
they're totally important and totally always underpaid.
You're right.
Yeah,
I agree.
Historically enslaved.
My point is that they're underpaid.
I'm 100% agreeing. And I love doing this show, and I can't wait to have the same conversation next spring because I think this winter is going to be a little tougher on when it comes to food. And from everything that I've been seeing and stuff, and how it goes, there could be a bunch of FOMO out there, but we'll see.
No, there are major production issues with wars going on,
absolutely,
and drought and climate change and other issues. we're not heading towards the surplus crop year. That's for
Well,
sure.
and you know,
I
Dr.
gotta
Coco,
jump out of
you.
here, guys, real
Oh
quick.
yeah, that's
My
true.
phone,
That's true.
yeah, so I'm gonna sneak out the back door, but thanks for this, guys. It was awesome. This was a great one. I love this one a lot. I'm gonna even go back and listen to this one again.
Yeah, this was a fun show.
Yeah, this was
I
really
agree.
nice. I really enjoyed it. And thanks, chat. I couldn't even, I'll admit it, I was absorbed in the conversation a lot and I missed a lot of chat. So that's another reason I might have to come back through and see what I missed in chat. I'm sorry if I missed the comment. Even if you tagged me, I may have missed you. I'm sorry. But I love you guys anyway. And growers love. We'll see you guys next week. Oh, I'm
Peace
going to
out,
Michigan
boys.
Rose Grow Show. I don't know who the hell's coming on, but I'll be there.
Grower love, Spartan.
Growers
Take
love,
it
guys.
easy, man.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll say this, like and I'm sure Dr. Coco, you probably know some anthropological examples, but like historically, farmers, yeah, it's maybe even mild to say that they don't have it the best. Usually, in a lot of cases, and I wouldn't expect that an emergency situation would be very much different nowadays. In fact, in some cases, maybe more egregious and worse. But if you only have a limited food supply, then some sort of entity or groups of entities are going to vie for the control over that for economic reasons, for just simple logistical reasons, for health reasons. So not to sound doom or gloom or anything, I'm not predicting anything, but like if something like that happens, that spiral is quick. And I'm just familiar with some of the things that people do in those emergency situations, just from like, you know, just past experiences and collegiate classes and things like that. It's
Yeah,
I don't know.
we're
Maybe that's a
fairly
little bit of a
well
rant. But
insulated from you know, a lot of global food supply issues because we're a
We're
very
the
rich country and
breadbasket
we're
of the
really rich
world, aren't we?
consumers. Yeah, so the price may go
Yeah.
up a little bit. When the price goes up a little bit, you know, we may complain, but it's probably going to be less than what the price of gas has gone up. But in a lot of places, when the price of food goes up, people literally starve. You know, malnutrition is still the leading cause of death. And yeah, it's a cruel, hard world out there, even when you're not going to be necessarily facing it ourselves. So I don't think by next spring we'll necessarily feel many of the effects of a global food sort of shortage, other than potentially higher prices. But other places, those higher prices will mean they can't eat anymore. And, you know, a bunch of food comes from the United States too, and we ship it elsewhere at discounted prices, which drives a lot of farmers elsewhere out of business, actually, in the long term. But when we stop those PL 580 programs, the program that buys up surplus grains from farmers and sells it at discount rates overseas, which we do to sort of protect our domestic market, that has huge sort of effects on grain prices in places in Africa and places in Asia. Can really create those kinds of problems. I'm off cannabis now, though, so never mind. Back to cannabis.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that what you just said I know that happened a lot in India recently, but I want to ask this question too. Maybe this could be the last question for the panel. But I know that in the past there were some movements to destroy basically all the cannabis in North America, or at least in the United States of America, using various ways, like the feral plants out there. Do you think we might see a reignition of that sort of directive, but coming from the effect of like people being afraid of like their crops getting pollinated or some sort of other commercial entity, like, you know, because the feral plants in other agricultural contexts can actually be problematic.
That's it. I mean, that would be a question I would throw to you, Matthew.
I have an opinion.
Yeah, what's your opinion?
Well, before you say yours, Matthew,
Yeah,
I would hope and think that they tried it and failed, right?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even really tried because of the gargantuan effort and resources that it would take. Like there was an example in my cannabis cultivation myths video on my channel where they were trying to, like, I think it was a fusarium species that they were trying to like airdrop everywhere surreptitiously. that would like go after the cannabis in particular and be very virulent. But like, first of all, they found it on cannabis. They think that they had to cultivate it on cannabis. Um, and there were other like just logistical problems with just transportation and creation. It was just not worth it. It was just literally not worth it. Now that there's a legal way to get a bunch of money from cultivation, maybe that would make sense. But honestly, a lot of extermination. I mean, we can't even get the spotted lanternfly under control. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Doc. What's your opinion? If you were I don't know you personally on that level, but if you were a gambling man, what would you set the line for when cannabis is treated like oranges and avocados? What would your line be? Would it be 10 years, 20 years?
I don't know if it ever will. I mean, that's part of the problem, because I see moneyed interests that are entrenching now to protect the price regime, which and the tax regime, right? I don't know that it ever will. They can also, the government's had an interest to restrict licensing or to sort of monitor that, restrict overall supplies too. So, and those same desires to control everything is one of the reasons that one of the more benevolent, I mean, for lack of a better word, reasons to potentially control home grow, as opposed to like the malevolent reasons of just wanting to like make more money for yourself. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get to start treating cannabis like soybeans and producing it at that kind of scale.
For something they can alter you as much as cannabis can to be as banal as oranges. This is sort of a trick answer to your question. I think it would require a lot of changes in how we view psychedelics in general, which we're seeing a lot of lately. But I think that would have to sort of sustain in the cultural consciousness for a while, probably multiple decades, if that were to happen at all. But as far as things like hemp and that sort of thing, I think that could resurge within my lifetime. That's not a very good range, I suppose, especially with medical technology getting better, I hope.
Yeah, I do think it's gonna moderate, but I end up thinking that the price of cannabis is gonna be sort of set more by the law rather than the market. And as any economist will tell you, that creates weird problems or weird issues happening in different parts of the market. And one of those issues, which is probably going to persist, it would be the space for a black market. Whether you want to consider all home growers sort of part of that or not, though, or depends on sort of how you're viewing the world in that market.
What do you think, though, Noah?
That's a good question. I had it in that 10, 20 years, but I tend to agree with Doc. I don't know, man. And I also loved your point. I mean, this is a very powerful thing. This is not soybeans. This is something big. So, and I think that everyone that's on this panel understands it, but I think there's a lot of people that genuinely don't understand how big the cannabis market, the cannabis effects, just the entire, how it's, people that are really seriously into it, it's a lifestyle. So it's so much, maybe even bigger than, I mean, I guess there's some pretty big wine heads and, especially beer guys and scotch, whatever, but cannabis, the people that are into it tend to be very enthusiastic. So it's very interesting. And I would have set the line at over 10 years, but I could see a scenario where, like Doc is saying, where it just flat out never happens.
Or like with hemp, for example, especially, versus like the other chemotypes out there.
And you guys both raised an interesting point that it's always sort of rubbed me a little bit wrong in the legalization side of cannabis when people are like, it's just a plant, you can't legalize it. It's like, but it's a damn special plant. I mean, it's not like any other plant.
That's why we like it so much, after all.
That's absolutely why we like it so much, right? But there
No one's saying
are,
this about dandelions.
yeah, and I'm personally not sort of the camp that thinks that you would need to regulate that, especially through a prohibition regime. But I think that needs to be at least part of the conversation that we're having here, because it is a peculiar and wonderful plant.
Yeah, somebody in the chat said that psychedelic substances probably will never be unregulated, and I provisionally agree with that statement. I think that I mean, there are some people who are sensitive to some compounds that are over the counter, and I mean they're still regulated, I suppose. But yeah, not that I agree necessarily with that premise, but it is kind of hard to imagine.
And here's a little bit of sort of prehistory and a little bit of anthropology for you. You know, intoxicating and hallucinatory substances were known to virtually every civilization, every culture on the planet, and they almost all enjoyed them. The only examples that we have of cultures that didn't have an intoxicatory or didn't use one is because they lived on an island in the South Pacific that literally didn't have anything that was a suitable candidate to make into a hallucinatory or intoxicating substance. It wasn't regulated until around the 14th century. Drug use wasn't regulated anywhere legally. In every society around the world, in every sort of small scale culture, they regulate the use of these things socially. They're used for specific purposes and at specific times. And, like all behavior is sort of regulated socially differently like that. So even in like the small scale societies, right, where use was common, reserved often for rituals or something, it was still regulated.
That's a good point.
It wasn't banished. And we don't have society anymore that we can sort of regulate effectively socially like that. And that's why we have a bunch of these laws and regulations and everything else. It's increasingly problematic at larger scales when you have like millions and millions of people that all have to agree on sort of guidelines for this. And that's sort of what we're facing, I guess. But yeah, I expect it will always be sort of regulated to some extent. Yeah. And I didn't even know where that was entirely going when I started, but it was hopefully interesting. And
it was definitely perspicacious. So now we should do our shout outs. Jack is here, and he will be closing us out, and we should respect his time. So I'm going to go first and say I really enjoyed hosting. I really liked the bevy of questions we got from the panel, and also some interesting ones from the chat. If you want to learn more about pests and plant health and ecology and that sort of a thing, and how you can grow in a conscientious way, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol.com for professional inquiries and consultation regarding pests. And you can also find me on my Instagram and Twitter at SyncAngel. Dr. MJ.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm like, should I just jump in here, or should I wait for him to call my name or say somebody else's name? This was a lot of fun, Matthew. You did a wonderful job as host. Short-staffed today, but I, have been reading some of the comments, not exactly participating in the chat, but I think the audience enjoyed the show today. I thought it was awesome and really enjoyed getting into some of the topics that we were able to get into. So let me run quickly through the bevy of things that I've got going on. In about half an hour, I'm going on the Berkshire Bud YouTube channel to do the New Year's Grow Challenge End of Grow Awards. The actual winners are chosen by like the California State Lottery when they chose their draw number. So that'll happen, and we're going to announce the winners and do a little live show this evening. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a par test premiere for the Atrium Hydra 3200. I'm doing a giveaway during that premiere, so show up to my Dr. MJ Coco YouTube channel. And after that premiere, we're going to go over to the Hemp with Gigi channel to do a live after show with Mike Lynn, the founder of Atrium Lighting. And then on Wednesday is 420, and we are starting the Spring Autoflower Challenge with a special live show on the Smart Poker YouTube channel. And everybody's dropping seeds for the Spring Autoflower Challenge. So sign up for that on cocoforcannabis.com/challenge and join us on the Smart Poker YouTube channel for the show on Wednesday night. Now it's a lot. So I'll shut up now. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com.
Noah, what's up?
Oh, hey, yeah, I'm Noah the Grower, and you can find me on Instagram there with 2 E's. And most weeks here, I'm going to be in Las Vegas this next Sunday, but I've been meaning to go live from there when I'm there, and I'm thinking I'm going to try. So I did it here on Easter, and I've been having such a blast with all you guys. I had such a great time today. And so the legalization stuff, that's I know how to grow a little bit, so I'm trying to kind of branch out in other areas. And that legalization, it's funny, I've been really kind of debating all this stuff in my head the last week, so it was really interesting to get it with everybody. I'm actually going to try and bring up the opinion of the question that I asked to the rest of the panel, and it's all here. But I had a great time. Thanks for hosting, Sync Angel, and yeah, I'll see everybody next week.
Thanks a lot. And Tao, where can we find you?
Matthew, thanks for hosting tonight, and thanks for Jack and MJ Coco, Spartan, and Noah the Grower, and everyone else who didn't make it. It's always a great, intriguing discussion, no matter who shows up or where the conversation meanders. And yeah, I'm the American One on YouTube, and the American One _with_Yakeens on the IG. If you search the American One, I'm the little guy with the American top hat on the IG. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And peace out to everyone. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next week.
Growers love.
Yeah. Is that it? Are we done? Is there a sign off?
Is there a Jack?
Is there a Jack?
Is there a Jack? Is it all over?
It's all over, guys. I think that's
All right,
it.
y'all. Have a good week. Catch you next week.
All right.
Peace and love. Jack
Grow
Greenstock
love.
signing out.